This is the OFN today, and we are getting ready to talk not only Detroit Lions football, but also the NFC North. As Jeff Risden is going to join us in just a second. You can actually see him right there. Wave, Jeff. Hi, Jeff. Ryan Dunleavy is back with me, though. Ryan, good to have you back. It's been over a week.
What's up? Good to be back. Yeah, crazy week of NFL negotiations, but supposedly football is starting soon.
And as I must say this, just because we're going to talk after the NFC North discussion we're going to have here in just a few seconds, we are going to talk about Jamal Adams and the Jets, Ryan. So that'll be a big topic a little bit later on. And as 28 years ago, Sidney Dean once said something that if you were a big fan of White Men Can't Jump, he said, "I don't like to brag, but I'm the greatest." And I only wanted to say that to tease everybody about the fact that, Ryan, we talked about this with Jamal Adams last week or a couple of weeks ago. We talked about it really for the last couple of months, that I felt that there was no way the Jets were going to trade Jamal Adams unless they got 2 first-round draft picks. Everybody thought that was ridiculous. There's no way the Jets were going to get 2 first-round draft picks. Ryan, what did the Jets get?
2 first-round draft picks plus. Yeah, it's unheard of. I think there's been 8 guys traded in the last however many years, 20 years, I think, for 2 first-round draft picks. Never a safety. I never thought it would be a safety, and that's what they got. They held out for what they needed to get, what you said they should get, and they got it.
By the way, Jeff, what did you think about that deal?
I thought it was crazy. Back when the Browns were allegedly in the sweepstakes for it, they were debating whether or not do we offer a first and maybe a third, or is that too much? And don't leave out Bradley McDougald. That guy, he's a solid, serviceable NFL starter. So that's already a hole that you don't even have to fill if you're the Jets.
Yeah.
And don't forget this. While you mentioned the Browns, don't forget this. Not to make it too New York centric, but 15 months ago, Odell Beckham was traded.
That's right.
Everybody was like, well, you got to get 2 first-round picks for Odell Beckham. And they didn't. They claim they did with Jabril Peppers. They count him as an additional first-round pick, even though he was in his 3rd year in the league. But they got more for Jamal Adams than they got for Odell Beckham, which is crazy because it's a wide receiver league, not a safety league.
Very true.
And what did you think about that deal, since you did cover the Browns, Jeff?
That one was it was very exciting. It was the sort of move that the Browns had been reluctant to make for years. It hasn't exactly worked out as expected. He was hurt last year, needing surgery for 3 separate sports hernias. Will do that to a guy. We're hopeful in Cleveland that next year will be a lot better, because I've seen him in person. When the Giants and the Lions did joint training camp session together, he put on a absolute show one day. I know that guy's there, and I'm waiting to see that again.
Yeah, well, new coaching staff, and there's a lot of hope in Cleveland, and I kind of feel that way, even though it's year 2 of the Adam Gase regime. But with all the injuries the Jets had last year, I'm just more excited about Joe Douglas, because to me that's what I think Jet fans can get excited about more than anything. Because when the GM part, I think is the first step in the whole process. Don't you agree, Ryan?
I think the owner is the first.
Yeah, that's
step.
true.
I think the owner.
Christopher's done a much better job than Woody, that's for sure.
The owner's so important in football, and I think the fact that Christopher Johnson was willing to give Joe Douglas the 6th year on his contract, which is not the norm, told you he was really invested in this guy, and so far the rewards have been really good. So I think the owner is not a problem, and the GM is a definite plus. And now I don't know if you have the right head coach or the right quarterback, but those are just as important.
Baby steps.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff. So you are the managing editor for At the Lions Wire. You also have the Detroit Lions podcast. You can check that out at YouTube, among other things. ESPN, right?
Yeah, ESPN Radio in Grand Rapids. I do a Sunday morning show.
And also you cover the Browns for the Wire?
I do. I'm a Cleveland native. I haven't lived there in some time, but you can't take the 216 out of the kid.
And is that a good thing?
It's always a good thing.
All right, so let's get into talk.
Odell doesn't like spending time in the 216. I know that.
All right, let's talk NFC North football. We've talked a lot about the Lions so far, Jeff, and we are going to start with the Lions, but you're also going to come on to talk about the NFC North. And obviously, if you're going to be talking about one team and cover that team, you really have to know the division. And I know you do know a lot about what's going on with the teams that the Detroit Lions are competing against. And I did a show last week with Mark Lawrence on our OFN NFL preview, and we both agreed that we thought the Detroit Lions were the sleeper team, one of the sleeper teams, not in the division, because I guess there would only be two, but really in the NFL. I thought that they could be that team because of how well they got off to last year before the injury to Stafford and then all the injuries. They still competed hard with quarterbacks that you couldn't believe that they'd be able to compete hard with. Thought they had a really good offseason. Free agency and the draft. This is such an important year for the GM and the coach. If Stafford stays healthy, I think the Lions are going to be in it for the long haul.
You know, they certainly have a path to success, and they have clearly identified what that path to success is. And we in Lionsland are all very hopeful that they follow that path and that the path winds up going successful. It can be hard to see that path being successful at times with aside from the injuries, the fact that they don't really have any impact standout players other than Stafford and perhaps Kenny Golladay. Trey Flowers was really good in his first year in Detroit as a pass rusher, but the big question is, can Matt Patricia coach this team, the collection of people that he has specifically chosen to be his Detroit Lions and epitomize what he wants in a team? Can he be the right guy to lead them to, they were 3-12-1 last year. Obviously, the injuries were terrible. They played two games where they had all of their inactive spots occupied by regular starters. It's tough to win that way, especially when one of them is your quarterback and he was having a phenomenal season. They made do with what they had. They were in most games. They had a fourth quarter lead in each of their first 12 games and somehow managed to only win 3 of them. That's a double-edged sword. It means that you're close to being good, but you're also not good enough to win. And the big question is, have they done enough in the offseason with their moves, both positive and negative, to become winners, to get over that hump? And that's a really good question, honestly. I definitely buy the fact that they've done positive things, but I can also see the skeptical eye that they might be a little further away in some areas too.
Before Ryan jumps in, I do want to ask you one more quick thing about Patricia, since you bring him up. Watching the games, you watch every move he makes. You've been watching him since he's been the head coach here with the Lions. What is it? What are his issues? What are the things? Because this is first-time head coach. So every first-time head coach is going to go through growing pains. There's going to be some things about time management or whatever that he just has to do a better job of. What does Matt Patricia need to do better for this team to be a playoff team?
I think he's followed the right path to his own personal becoming a better coach. When he got into town, he did what most Belichick disciples do. He made the press the enemy. He was deliberately hard on established veterans to see how they would react, how would the locker room fit. It didn't work. He had a little bit of a dust up with the Detroit media that was on the media's end's fault. We're guilty on that one. But he's changed since then. He's become a much better coach of men. I think one of the things that I really took from seeing him in person, coaching young people at the Senior Bowl this year, he's a really, really good teacher. And I think he's figured out that to get back to what made him an attractive head coaching candidate was the fact that he is really good working with players and they respect what he has to say. And he is a very smart guy. And he does have, he's a different type of person than your typical head coach. And the players saw through the fact that he wasn't really being himself that first year. And it's been tough for him to get over that. That's the reason why a lot of the talent that was in place is jettisoned. That's why Darius Slay isn't in town anymore. That's why Quandre Diggs is gone. A few others fall under that umbrella as well. He's evolving into a very good coach. The problem is that the damage that he did in the first year might be too severe for him to recover from in Detroit. I will say this, if it doesn't work in Detroit for him, I do think he is going to get another shot somewhere else, and I wouldn't bet against him in the second stint.
So Belichick.
Yeah. So the thing is, he comes off as, because we have the Patriot way in Detroit. But the more I have watched Patricia, the more he is a Bill Parcells guy and not a Bill Belichick guy. And you would know the difference being from New York. It's similar, but it is definitely a different vein. He is much more in the Parcells vein. And it's important to remember that Parcells didn't win a lot without Belichick.
Yeah. Tell me about the defense. No Darius Slay, obviously, but a couple of Patriot guys in there, right? Deron Harmon, Danny Shelton. Tell me about the defense. If Stafford picks up where he left off, which isn't a guarantee, but if he does, I think the offense is pretty good with the new running backs, the young running backs, Galladay. Where's the defense at?
They have to be better. That you mentioned the Patriots. They brought in three of them. They brought in Harmon, they brought in Danny Shelton, and Jamie Collins. Each of them instantly is the best guy at their position group on the team. That sort of tells you where the team was at last year. Now, a lot of that was injury related. Damon Harrison fell off an absolute cliff. He came into camp out of shape and unmotivated. That didn't work out for him.
Too. That sounds familiar too.
Yeah, you would know about that too. Yeah. I love Snacks, but man, it wasn't a good year for him. They signed Mike Daniels last year. He came in, he wasn't recovered. It was obvious why the Packers gave up on him. There was just a lot of that. Collins is the key addition because they needed desperately a linebacker who can cover but can also roam side to side. Jared Davis has been a bust in the middle as a first-round pick. Jelani Tavai entering his second year. He showed some signs. He sort of hit the rookie wall and never really got back over it like a lot of rookies do, which was a little frustrating. He's a smart guy. He's a very intelligent physical football player. He's the kind of guy that the Patricia's going to like. Collins, best cover linebacker in the league. I covered him in Cleveland, and my worry is that I did cover him in Cleveland, and he absolutely quit on a very bad team. And if this team isn't good, I worry about that again. But man, he is exactly what he does so many things for the defense that they could not do last year. So he's a factor. Young Tracy Walker at safety is a guy that does not get enough attention. He is a rising star. He's really, really good, folks. Very rangy safety. Unfortunately, most people recognize him for his one missed tackle last season. It was the only one he missed in 2 months, but it wound up being on a highlight reel. Other than that, he's a really, really good player. They have Jeff Okudah, their number one pick, number 3 overall. He is going to start right away. I will use my Pat line that I've used several times on him, but it's appropriate here. Denzel Ward was his predecessor at Ohio State. He was the number 4 overall pick in the 2018 draft and was a Pro Bowler as a rookie in Cleveland. Jeff Okudah was better at every single thing at cornerback at Ohio State. It's hard not to be excited about what he can do.
I know a bunch of college coaches that recruited Okudah or coached Okudah. A lot of people that came through Ohio State one way or another on my Rolodex, and they rave that he is, 8-time All-Pro caliber cornerback.
That would certainly help the defense.
And talk about how that will also be a difference when you take a look at Darius Slay. Didn't seem to fit Patricia's press coverage defense, whereas Okudah apparently will fit that more. But also how that particular defense, you need to accumulate turnovers because that's what that's all about. You're putting pressure on the offense, and by putting pressure on the offense, you're supposed to get turnovers. That didn't happen for the Lions, so. That is going to be so, and that's why I think this is a team that has the ability to make that kind of a switch where, I don't even know how many wins they had. 3 or 4 wins last year? How they can
3.
make that switch from that level to a double-digit win team. When you do that, turnovers can really help out in that department.
Oh, absolutely. And their starting corners this year are different from last year. Slay did not have a great year. I will not disparage Darius Slay. He's a very good player, and he's going to be really good in Philadelphia. And I actually just did a rewatch of the Lions-Cowboys game last year. He absolutely erased Amari Cooper from the face of the earth. So he still has that ability to do things. It's easy to see why the Eagles were excited about him. But he was not a great fit. Okudah should be a better fit. The other cornerback is Desmond Truffant. He can be a good number 2. The Lions have actually had really good luck at picking up sort of aged veterans who can come in and buy a year or two as a quality stopgap guy. They had Chris Houston for that for a while. They had Rasheed Mathis. They got a couple of great years out of him. They had James Ahedebo come in as a safety to do that. They've had some luck there, and hopefully that luck will continue because he is taking over for Rashawn Melvin, who was awful. It keeps Justin Coleman in the slot. Coleman started really well and then turned awful as the season progressed on. He was an impact turnover maker. He was punching balls out. He forced 3 fumbles in the first 4 games. Didn't do anything the rest of the year. So
maybe he's just one of those players where the team isn't winning.
Yeah, exactly. The secondary looks really good. They do have guys who can get the ball back. They have to do it. The big issue then is, can the guys up front get pressure? This team rushed 3. So here's the thing with Detroit last year. They did a great job against Patrick Mahomes. They held Kansas City without throwing a touchdown pass. They did that by rushing 3 and dropping 9 and confusing Mahomes. The problem was that they kept in that same shell of an unaggressive defense. And guess what? Opposing offenses figured out what they were going to do. Dak Prescott was back there making tea and crumpets when he was in the pocket. You know, the guys had so much time to throw, and it killed them. They don't have any impact pass rushers. Flowers is a very good player. He is not a guy who commands. He's not Khalil Mack, to talk about a guy. He's not Myles Garrett. He's not that guy. And they don't have that guy. And because of that, you have to manufacture your rush. You have to scheme it. Well, scheming the rush takes away from scheming in the coverage, and that didn't seem to be something that Patricia was comfortable doing. So I'm hopeful that Patricia will self-scout. He's a bright guy. He'll find that balance between being too passive and relying so much on the coverage sack instead, and maybe turn the dogs loose a little bit and go after it and force some things, because they were definitely way too passive last year.
And as far as the Patriots, Collins and Harmon should be huge players for this defense, especially Collins, because as you mentioned with the linebacker position, the Lions have struggled at that position for years.
Yeah, and Daron Harmon is going to fill a very big role. When they traded Quandre Diggs, they moved up Will Harris, their 3rd-round pick last year. He was not ready, to be blunt. He's always the last guy moving. Oftentimes receivers have taken several steps before he's moving. He just doesn't see it all that well. There was a very noticeable drop off. Quandre Diggs, I admit I am a fan of Quandre Diggs. I like the guy a lot personally. He did not play all that well in Detroit. Sort of recovered once Seattle gave him a little bit more motivation to play. But there was a massive drop-off, even though he wasn't playing well. And that's something that Harmon fills. And again, this is a really, really good secondary. Hopefully they can keep it together and stay healthy. And like you said, Greg, get the ball back.
We mentioned some offensive weapons. Here's a guy isn't proven, and maybe fantasy team owners that I know might be interested in how he performs. But is TJ Hawkinson ready to actually make a contribution, or is he just Eric Ebron and Brandon Pettigrew 3.0?
Shudder. No, he came out of the gate fantastic last year. And then he hit a wall as well. He did actually climb over the rookie wall, and he was playing better than his stats would indicate in the last 3 or 4 games before he got hurt. He suffered a very nasty broken ankle. He looks like he's okay. He posted a video of himself working out a couple weeks ago. He looks good. He looks like he's added some muscle.
Isn't it funny how guys never post videos of themselves looking bad?
Isn't it? Yeah.
All the trainer videos we see all offseason are like, wow, that guy looks explosive.
Yeah, Odell Beckham's really good at that.
He's great at that. He's great at that too.
Yeah.
That's an unbelievable video. Did he just jump out of a pool?
Yeah. Tristan Wirfs did that. That was insane. Yeah. Hawkinson, I think he's going to be a very good player. He is not George Kittle, his predecessor at Iowa, but he's a guy who can reliably, you can pencil him in for 50 catches, 500 yards, and a handful of touchdowns. And I think that's a very realistic contribution goal for Hawkinson in his second season. He had no chemistry at all with Jeff Driscoll, and that was part of the issue. It was easy to not have chemistry with Jeff Driscoll. He actually had a little bit working with David Blau at the end, but he's learning. I'm still. Look, do you take a tight end at number 8 overall? No, you don't. But he's a good player. He's got to overcome that stigma. He's got to overcome the Eric Ebron stigma. That's still a very sore point in Detroit, and a sore point for Ebron too. If you ever follow him on social media, he will be very quick to point that out as well. We're pretty optimistic about it. Hopefully Jesse James doesn't look like the complete bust that he was in his first season coming over from Pittsburgh. It was obvious from the first day of training camp that he was being paid too much for what he was going to be doing in Detroit. Logan Thomas was better than him. Logan Thomas is now in Washington, and a lot of people regret that. Hopefully the arrow's pointing up for him too, because they do have attention to the tight ends. They have an offensive coordinator who will use a tight end. Let's see if that can, those two things can come together this year. It'd be nice.
A couple more quick things on the offense, and then we'll talk about the rest of the teams in the division. But it does look like the defense was the priority this offseason, combining the picks and free agency. So when you look at the offense, it looks like, okay, there's some more young players in the interior of the offensive line that will hope to help the team out. You got the Eagles right tackle. Assumably he's going to play there, right tackle. Other than that, I mean, look, I'm a Cephas fan. I like him. I think that he's got the ability to be a pretty good player with a really good quarterback at the controls, but you've got the same three receivers pretty much, which is fine, and the tight end we talked about. You bring in DeAndre Swift, it helps the depth at the running back position, but overall, the numbers just aren't there as much as the defense.
Yeah, they're thin. There's no way to put it around that. Kenny Golladay was phenomenal last year, led the NFL in touchdowns. He's a contested catch machine. He's a contested catch machine because he literally never gets open unless they blow a coverage. But, man, he's really, really good at what he does. And Matthew Stafford is the perfect quarterback for that. At the end of his time in Detroit, Calvin Johnson was sort of that guy. I am not comparing Kenny Golladay to Calvin Johnson other than stylistically. They are certainly not the same player or same caliber of player. But Galladay's a really good player, and Marvin Jones never gets enough credit. He is the consummate pro, great number 2 receiver.
NFL. I think one of the most you hit a big point. I think he's one of the most underrated guys there is in the league.
Absolutely. And he's back. It's a contract year for both of them. It's also a contract year for Danny Amendola, who had a very pleasant season in the slot after dropping 2 passes in the opener. He was phenomenal the rest of the year. His role expanded as the year went on, so it's exciting to have him back. But then, Quintez Cephas is a 6th-round rookie out of Wisconsin who ran a 4.75. He's your number 4 receiver going into the season. Greg, you're right. He can play. There is something there, but it's a very niche what he can do. And the guys been that, Chris Lacey, Travis Fulgham, these are practice squad guys on a lot of teams. So they've got to stay healthy there. They got to have Stafford at the controls too. But the starting skill position weapons are great. You get beyond that, and you're getting ugh.
Yeah. And injuries will occur.
Yes.
How does the running back situation work? Is it Swift? Is it carry on? What's the story there? I don't know what the reaction was from the Lions. I was very interested. They went running back in the 2nd round. I don't know how the fan base felt.
A lot of the fans were pretty excited about it. They're tired of Kerryon Johnson being hurt. This was his 7th consecutive offseason needing a surgery or injury rehab going back to high school.
Wow.
So he was one of those weird cases at Auburn. He used to get hurt in the last game of the year every year. He sped that up a little bit last year. He's been good. He's not been great, but he's been good. He's been good enough to be a starter. The hope is that between him and Swift and Bo Scarborough showed something when he was in limited duty last year. He came in. If you get him the ball and he's running forward, you can do some things with Bo Scarborough as a short yardage between the tackles pounder back. So they have, in theory, a nice shell of a running back by committee. And Ty Johnson was no slouch as a rookie either. He actually had some pretty nice moments and can catch the ball out of the backfield. Question is, how do they sort all that out? How do they keep all those guys happy? How does it ordinate? That is what training camp is for, because I'll be honest with you, I don't think anybody really knows how that's going to go, Patricia included.
All right, now let's talk about the Packers. And the big story with the Packers was the quarterback position, of course, Jordan Love, and how is that going to fall into place over the next few years? Well, we will wait and see. But this is about this season, and the Packers didn't really make a whole lot of changes in free agency, and then they did seem to have some questionable decisions in the draft, not only with Jordan Love when you have Aaron Rodgers, but also A.J. Dillon in the 2nd round. It's like, what are you using a 2nd-round draft pick on an A.J. Dillon when Aaron Jones broke out last year, and he could basically be your ball hog. There's a lot of confusion of what was going on with the Packers, and I don't know if they were overconfident because of the wins they had, but that's why there's no way I see the Packers equaling the number of wins they had. Maybe they'll be a better team, but they're going to come back to the pack in my mind a little bit.
Yeah, I think 13-3 is unrealistic for them again. They seem to be treading water offensively. That seems to be their motif for the offseason. Now they're really good, and when you've got Aaron Rodgers, there's not many guys who swim better than Aaron Rodgers. So, I think we talked about this, Greg, when we did the draft recap. The fact that Love might motivate Rodgers to play out of his mind is a very scary thought for the rest of the NFC North, and I would not discount that whatsoever. Sure. But at the same time, Rodgers did show some. I don't want it to come across as overly critical. He wasn't a deity last year like he has been for most of his career. There were some signs of fallibility there last year, not just in with his attitude, but in his throwing. He missed some throws that he would never miss before. If that's a trend, then that sort of explains why they took Love. But it doesn't really help them. Their first two picks, it doesn't help them on the field in 2020. No.
I don't think
maybe they're taking a longer view with that, and they're just hopeful that what they did last year, which was very, very good, can carry over. Jones, man, he is a fun guy to watch work, and I'm very happy for him. He was a guy that I championed in the draft back in the day.
Yeah, I did too. And was he drafted? He was a late rounder, like a fifth rounder, right?
He didn't go anywhere near where he should have. That's for sure.
And I remember talking about it with Dan Shanka as, hey, here's a sleeper, UTEP. They don't do nothing at UTEP football, but when you watch the UTEP games, you saw something there. And now even Dan Shanka didn't think that he would make much of an impact in the NFL because of his size. But hey, sometimes you get those players that they just have it. It doesn't matter what their size is or what school they went to.
That's right.
All right. What about one more before I let Ryan chip in here on the Packers? What about the fact that just like the Lions, there's not a lot of depth at receiver. Matter of fact, I think the Lions have better receivers than the Packers do, and the Packers didn't even do a thing at the receiver position. They drafted a tight end in the third round, which, by the way, I like the kid, but third round was a little bit high. Sternberger was a third rounder last year, didn't do anything. So those are their two big tight ends they got to hope will make an impact. And at receiver, it's the same guys. St. Brown, Valdez-Scantling. Devin Funchess, you can't count on him. So when you talk about when Aaron Rodgers, sometimes it's what's going on with the talent around him too. Even when he's making a bad pass, sometimes it ain't necessarily Aaron Rodgers. Sometimes it's the receivers not doing what Aaron Rodgers wants them to do.
Yeah, Devontae Adams is fantastic, and his career progression is very. It's really nice because this was a guy that a lot of Packers fans were ready to trash can after his first couple of seasons, and he has really proven to be a legit number one wide receiver. He's a playmaker. He is a very difficult assignment for any team. The rest of that team, you got Valdez-Scantling. He's all right. Allen Lazard gives you something, but they're not the dynamic forces that you always think of the Packers having the two guys, going way back. They don't have that anymore. They have one real big guy, and they have a lot of guys who can do certain things, but they don't have that. Anybody who impacts the defense, and I think that's the big key is can they find somebody besides Adams who can impact the defense?
Ryan? Oh, Ryan froze up at the wrong time. Ryan hopefully will unfreeze in a minute. Rashawn Gary. This has got to be a big year for Rashawn Gary. This is a player that there was a lot expected from him last year with the pick that, obviously a first round draft pick. But I get the feeling Rashawn Gary is going to have a breakout year.
They need him. Well, they don't necessarily need him to. It would be nice to recoup some face from that draft, though. But yes, it was a very curious draft pick because they drafted him to play outside, and they signed both Za'Darius and Preston Smith, who were both good in that position. Gary, when he was at Michigan, and I go to more than my share of Michigan games, was much wide, and they tried to move him outside. And I'm not sure that worked for anybody's best purpose. So I'm kind of hopeful that they find a way to get him in more in a 5-tech role or even attacking inside, because I do think he has the game to do that. Za'Darius Smith was a home run, so that sort of takes the sting away from it. But yeah, he's going to be on the spot this year. They've had the sort of a checkered results with their first round picks and second round picks, especially if they're in the secondary. He's one that if they're gonna stay at 13-3 and stay as legit, NFC contenders, he's a guy that has to step up.
They need to be able to stop their run too. I mean,
definitely.
Raheem Mostert got a new contract today, basically because the Packers they can rush the passer, but they can't stop the run. And
no, they can't. And that's sort of the nature of what they got. Kenny Clark's a really good player, but he's a pass rusher. Both the Smiths, they're really good players, but they are primarily pass rushers at their core. And their linebackers were just awful last year. I know Blake Martinez made a ton of tackles, but they're all 5 to 6 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. That's
big defensive addition, Blake Martinez.
He's better than B.J. Goodson. I'll give him that.
And Christian Kirksey.
Christian Kirksey is in, and he's going to be an interesting one because, in theory, the Christian Kirksey who was really good in Cleveland early in his career is a great fit. The Christian Kirksey the last couple of years who's been hurt all the time probably doesn't even make the team. So that's one to watch. Okay. If he's healthy, if he's motivated, he will definitely help them. He will help them in the leadership department. That was something they don't, they got a lot of decent players there. They don't have that one unifying vocal leader that you see. He can be that guy. And if he does that role for him, he's going to be invaluable for him.
They have some talent in the secondary, though. And they haven't had this much talent in the secondary probably since they won the Super Bowl.
They've been trying. They hit a home run with Jair Alexander. He's great. Coming out of Louisville, there were people that were questioning his size and his ability to hang with bigger receivers. But man, he's been lights out. He's one of the best cornerbacks in the league already after 2 years. He's really good. King has stepped up into his own. I think he's finding a comfort level at being that number 2 cornerback and not necessarily being asked to be the number 1. I think that he didn't wear that crown very well. So they like Detroit, their secondary is really, really good. It's not particularly deep. They don't have the depth of talent, but they're starting 4 or 5 in the back they can be special.
Okay, Minnesota Vikings get the big playoff win. You would have thought they won the Super Bowl after the Saint win last year, and then the next week they get blown out pretty much. So there goes that. But hey, at least Kirk Cousins has a playoff win. So yeah, very nice. Now what is he, 1-13 or something like that? I don't know. Anyway, the Vikings though made a ton of changes, especially in the secondary. They got a lot of young kids back there. It's not easy to learn the system for Zimmer in that secondary. So they're going to take a lot of lumps, but they're going to play a lot. So they have to play. They got just so many players. What did they have? 15 draft picks. So there are going to be some. Yeah, they're going to be some young players.
15 draft picks in a year with no OTAs, in a year with limited training.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, to me, there's 2 huge storylines with the Vikings, right? Dalvin Cook and the rookies. And it's like these 15 rookies, you're going to have to count on these guys in a year where counting on rookies is like harder than ever.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing to do. They are changing their offense a bit. Kevin Stefanski's now in Cleveland. Took a couple of assistants with him. Yeah, they're kind of enigmatic. They still have some frontline talent. I think the biggest thing for them is that they don't have Everson Griffin back.
Yeah.
He's still out there, and most of the rest of the NFC North fan bases and media seem to think he's going to wind up back there, but he isn't there yet. And as long as he's gone, that's a huge loss. I mean, they still have some talent up front, but he was the ringleader. And if they don't have him as the catalyst, that has ripple effects down that line where those guys just aren't as good without him as they are with him. And if they don't have that, then that young secondary is going to get even more exposed. Now, they're great at safety. Harris is unbelievable back there. Another completely underappreciated player. If he played in New York, if he played in New England, he'd be a household name. He's really, really good and very good fit for their defense. But, again, if you don't have that pressure up front, and they're lacking that right now based on what they've done, it's going to make life tougher for them.
You mentioned if he played in New York. Actually, the Giants were hoping he would not get
That's right.
That was the guy they really wanted on their in free agency. They were hoping he didn't get tagged. He got tagged, and then actually NFL Network's Mike Garafolo reported the Giants actually tried to trade for him after he was tagged. So, yeah, he's a guy certainly New York was aware that he would give the player in New York.
I do
Yeah,
I do like the young players they drafted, but again, young players up front. They have Woonem. I think Willikis could be a steal in the 7th round. You got James Lynch, even Troy Dye could be an impact player for them. He's a really good tackler from Oregon, played a ton of football, and they're going to need some pressure up front because of that young secondary. But I think the thing that would scare me the most is Justin Jefferson now takes over for Diggs. Now, supposedly, he's a talented kid. We see that. And if there is no mistake in that, then, and most importantly, Thielen stays healthy, they're okay. But if Jefferson goes through some rookie growing pains and Thielen misses 3 or 5 games like he missed last year, they're in big trouble.
Yeah, they don't have any depth at their offensive skill positions at all, other than running back. I think they're okay if Cook sits for a game or two. They don't want more than that because he's clearly a guy who is going to be the focal point of their offense. And I think that the transition away from Kirk throwing the ball all the time to Thielen and Diggs, I think that can help because I think Cook is up for it. And I think their offensive line doesn't get enough love. They have a decent offensive line in Minnesota, better than they've had in quite some time. And they're solidified and they're fairly stable there. So that's going to help them. Cousins is a guy who, okay, I am in Holland, Michigan. I am in Kirk Cousins' hometown. He is a hero here. He will be our congressman someday, and people are going to be very happy about that. So it's tough for me to be too difficult on Kirk Cousins, but he also has to be better. There are times where he is definitely in the tier of quarterbacks with the Matt Ryans and the Jared Goffs and guys who can win multiple playoff games in a year for you, but he's not always there. And it's on Kirk to elevate himself to that level too. Jefferson's going to help. I think he's a really talented player. I really liked what he offered at LSU, and I think I think it translates well to the pros. Thielen is Thielen. He's a lion killer first off. But beyond that, they don't have that depth though, and those guys have to step up for him. Kyle Rudolph's back at tight end. He's amazing to me. He gets so much love from the fantasy community, even though he doesn't always produce like a number 1 fantasy tight end. But then you watch him play, and like, God, that guy's really good. There's just nothing he doesn't do really well.
And they spent a 2nd-round draft pick on Irv Smith. You spent a 2nd-round draft pick on a tight end. You want that player to be an impact player. So far, that hasn't happened.
And it wasn't there for him. He like TJ Hawkinson last year. He has to learn how to block. And it's not just being an inline blocker. It's being out in space. And okay, on this run, I got to pick off the backside safety. That's my job. And Hawkinson wasn't getting there, and Irv Smith sure as heck wasn't getting there.
All right, let's wrap up with the Bears. And wow, just a change from one year to the next. Trubisky starts to look like he's going to pay off with the fresh, young, innovative head coach. And then comes last year. And I don't think a team missed. And no question, the offense and Trubisky soured, no doubt about it. But I also don't think a defense missed a team missed an assistant coach leaving more than the Bears missed Fangio leaving. I know Pagano's a good coach. He is. But Fangio was a special coach. That was a monster defense. Most of the players came back. They were just not the same.
Yeah, they didn't seem to have the chemistry that they had. And Khalil Mack, he fell off a little bit. He's still great. Don't get me wrong, but he wasn't the same player that he was when he first got there and what he was in Oakland. I think he's going to be back. I think he's primed for a prove-it year where he's going to be, hey, I may not have been great last year. I'm back, boys. I really believe, I'm a big believer in him. They had some injuries as well, but you're right. They missed Fangio. They sort of got the wrong end of the deal in the whole safety swapping with Green Bay. But yeah, they're still a defensive-oriented team, and when you have Mitch Trubisky or Nick Foles as your quarterback, you need to be a defensive-oriented team. Their starting defense can still be really, really good. They are going to miss Nick Kwiatkowski in the middle, though. That guy did a lot that did not get on the stat sheet. He did do a lot on the stat sheet, too, with tackles, but he was a really solid player that they've got to replace in the middle there. But, I'm a huge Eddie Jackson fan. I like what they have at cornerback. I don't love it, but I like it. It's good enough for them to win when they have a good pass rush, and if Mac is what I think he's going to be, the pass rush will be fine.
Any chance that Trubisky beats out Foles? any chance.
There are some people in the Chicago media who do believe that Trubisky is going to rise to the challenge. Okay. I'm not in the Chicago media, but I am not one of them. I am not a Foles fan either, but I understand where they're at, and he's functional anyways. I'm going through and rewatching the Lions season, which is my own summer of hell. But one of the games that was in Chicago, Trubisky completed a pass to his left, and the fans in Chicago literally got up and gave a standing ovation because he finally did it. That's the kind of low expectations that they have for Trubisky right now. I can't say too much as a Lions fan though, because he never loses to Detroit.
I just think Foles has got a raw deal in Jacksonville.
He did.
People knock him as like, oh, he can only win in Philadelphia. Well, if you've ever tried to win in Philadelphia, if you can win in Philadelphia, you can win pretty much anywhere.
Yeah, why would you poo-poo that? That's a heck of an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and it doesn't seem though. See, the thing I'm wondering is if they struggle again and Trubisky, he's not the guy. Or let's just say they're 500, but they don't make the playoffs, and Trubisky is not part of the team pretty much, and he's a disaster. Do they then? What kind of changes do they make? Is Pace gone, but Nagy stays? How does that work out? Or was Nagy the one that said, "I want Trubisky," and then therefore both of them need to go?
My understanding is that it was Pace's call to go get Trubisky and make that move, and that's his signature move. That and the Mac deal. So I mean, you win one, you lose one. You can't miss on the quarterback though. They cannot persist in the state that they're in with Trubisky still on the team. If he's not the guy, he's got to go. Because of the situation that we're in with the pandemic, you probably can't cut him just because you're probably going to need depth. But in a normal season, I think the right move, if Foles were to win the job, and I do expect him to win, would be to cut Trubisky right then and cut your losses, admit your mistake, and move on. I don't think they're going to do that. That's personally what I would do. But again, because of the depth thing that you have this year, to defend Trubisky a little bit, their offensive tackles, specifically right tackle, was awful. He didn't get a lot of help from his offensive line either. Their receivers, outside of Allen Robinson, don't really scare anybody. Maybe they'll get better this year. Robinson is – I feel for Allen Robinson, man. This guy had Christian Hackenberg as his quarterback in college. He made Hackenberg look like an NFL prospect. He went to Jacksonville, did that with Blake Bortles. Now he's in Chicago. Can we please get Allen Robinson a good quarterback just for a year, please? He's really, really good.
And it could be this year if Nick Foles is the man.
It could be. All
right. So, Jeff, we'll talk to you again in a few weeks, talking more NFC North football and, of course, everything going on with the Detroit Lions. We'll probably have you on at least one more time to get some sort of prediction deal going on, and hopefully the players will remain healthy in camp, or at least most of the key players, including Matthew Stafford. Keep him healthy.
That would be great. Yes, we need that. That would be a wonderful change for Detroit, was to have everybody healthy through a year.
When is your podcast available?
We are recording. We normally record on Wednesdays, but we're a little off schedule now. We are trying to do something for the start of training camp, which I think the players get there Thursday. So we'll probably have something.
Okay, Jeff, appreciate it. We'll talk to you next time.
All right, thank you.
All right. Jeff Risdon here, joining us once again from the Lions Wire. He'll be back in a few weeks. We'll talk more Detroit Lions football. In the meanwhile, so tell me, Ryan, we have a couple minutes to go. Jamal Adams, what did you think overall about the trade?
I thought once he bashed Adam Gase, there was no stopping him at that point. He had trashed Woody Johnson on Twitter. He had trashed Adam Gase. Next, he was going to trash teammates. They had to get him out of the locker room. My colleague, Brian Costello at the New York Post, actually broke the news of the trade and said that the trade had actually been in the works for a little while, just not finalized, and really came together once the parameters of the economic deal for the NFL and the NFLPA was settled on Friday. Look, I think it's a great deal for the Jets. They get worse in the long run, sure, in the short term. I mean, which isn't great for Adam Gase's future, but for Joe Douglas, it's a home run. They now have extra draft picks, which I think are important for two reasons. One, do you want to package those guys and go the picks and go get Yannick Ngakoue? Say you take the 5th you got from the Giants for Leonard Williams and one of the firsts from the Seahawks and try to go get Yannick Ngakoue. The Jaguars probably have a hard time turning that down. Or do you want to keep your extra first-round picks in case Sam Darnold isn't the right quarterback, and then you can move up and draft the right quarterback or at least the guy you hope is the right quarterback by offering some team a bunch of first-round picks. So you have some flexibility.
No, good point on Ngakoue, and I wonder, is that something where if they make the move, it happens before the season starts, or is it, let's see how the season begins? I'm not sure when the deadline, if it's going to change at all with everything going on, but let's say the first month of the season, they're off to a 3-1 start, or a 3-2 start, or a 4-2 start before the deadline. Now they go, you know what? Okay, now maybe we should pull the trigger on this deal, as opposed to pulling the trigger on the deal before the season begins. You don't really have much of a year this year anyway, and maybe we just could have waited and got this deal cheaper in 2021.
Yeah, to me, it's all about who you pay, whatever timing you would do it. And I don't know that they will do it. It makes a lot of sense for them. But to me, you're going to give out a big contract. You're much better off giving it to Yannick Ngakoue or a similar caliber pass rusher than you are to Jamal
What would you
Adams
do? Would you go ahead and take the chance if the Jags said yes to any deal before the season began?
I would make that move. If I was the Jags, if I was Joe Douglas, if I called the Jags and they were interested in one of those first, be it 2021 or 2022, one of those first and the 5th from Leonard Williams for Yannick Ngakoue, yes, absolutely. I give my fan base a new game changer to root for, and a guy who says, I want to be here. I want to be with the Jets. Sign me long term. Absolutely. And I turn the whole narrative
great point.
around.
And I can't see why the Jets wouldn't entertain that with those additional draft picks that they have, because you're not going to give up more than a first round pick for that kid. Yeah, because I'm sure the Jags are probably hoping, like all these teams, like the Jets did. Well, let me see if I can get 2 first round draft picks for this guy, but that's just not going to happen. I don't think so, at least. So.
Well, the difference is the Jets had the leverage over Adams. If you wanted Adams, you had to give him 2 first-round picks because they could control him this year, next year, the year after that. The Jaguars, Ngakoue's not coming, so you're getting nothing for him right now. He's not coming to training camp. He's holding out. You've already on the franchise tag point. You literally are getting nothing for him. The Jets were going to have Jamal Adams in camp. The Jaguars literally have nothing. They have no body. So their leverage, you can get him for much less.
Hey, I'm hoping that'd be a great move. Like you said, not sure that's anything that's going to happen, but it is definitely something to ponder.
And some other news here too, Greg. While we were on the call with Jeff, the NFL put Deandre Baker and Quentin Dunbar on the commissioner's exempt lists. So neither guy will be able to practice in training camp till that legal situation we've talked about on here, the arrests for assault and armed robbery, is resolved. Both guys will be on the commissioner's exempt list,
which we figured that was going to happen. Yeah. All right, so we'll talk again on Friday. Nothing scheduled as far as an interview. This will give us an opportunity to talk a little bit more about the Adams fallout, and definitely everything that takes place this week, the first week of training camp. Thank goodness training camp is here in the NFL.
Yes, thank goodness. And hopefully it's not a situation where the baseball shutdown trickles into the football. Hopefully guys are getting tested and everything is going the direction everybody expects.
If that happens, then we know college football has little chance to come back.
Zero.
All right, Ryan, thanks a lot. Great job as always. We'll talk to you on Friday.